This is my 1977 Datsun 280Z, and it's time I finally work on this, and I want to do something a little different. I'm going to build it into a safari car. What is a safari car? Well, they're standard road-going sedans or coupes modified to race off-road, and in 1971, Nissan did exactly that, fielding 3 240Zs in the East African Safari Rally, which is one of the toughest, longest, and most grueling rally racing challenges in the world. This is really cool and all, but where I live on the East Coast, there is no safari. What we have here instead in Virginia is the largest continuous national forest on the East Coast, which spans 1.8 million acres. That means we have access to a ton of fire roads and trails that span all across the Appalachian Mountains, although it's small compared to what the West Coast has to offer, but I'll take what I can get. If you're a subscriber, you already know I have an 80 series Land Cruiser, which can do the whole overlanding, off-road stuff perfectly fine stock, so why even bother doing the same thing but worse? Well, the 280Z is just sitting here, begging to do something different after suffering for 193,000 miles on just normal roads. And at the same time, this will force me to address some maintenance items that have sat neglected. So here's the plan. Safari cars follow a simple formula. Modify the suspension to increase the ground clearance, more off-road oriented tires to handle the abuse, we'll add some underbody protection to keep all the fluids in, and of course we have to make it look the part with some rally inspired lights and mud flaps. And in the end, see if I ruin this 280Z or give it a new lease on life. Okay, first things first, we gotta compare, get a baseline on the ride height. And what's the lowest point on this car? It's actually the radiator. And we are at 6 inches for the radiator in the front. It's too low for me to sneak under the car to measure from the rear differential, so this bumper will have to do. We're sitting at 17 inches, a full inch below the median factory service manual specified range of 18. Now we know how it sits, let's see how it drives. After topping up, we'll go on a 67.8 mile loop that takes us on both highway and rural 2-lane back roads for a fuel economy test, and we'll keep track of any issues found along the way. 2 main rules to stay consistent on this test are over 45 miles an hour, the windows will stay closed, and no hypermiling. Drive like normal and have fun. There are several major problems that are immediately evident. The tires are just the wrong size. These sidewalls are super low profile compared to stock, and I bought them because they were cheap and didn't even bother checking overall height, just that they would fit the wheels, which was a mistake years ago when we first rescued the Z and got it running. As a result, at 75 miles an hour, the revs are hovering around 3,500, which feels really abusive, but on the plus side, you're always in the power band. Another issue is that one of the wheels is actually bent and was never able to be balanced properly, so there's a vibration at speed. And to go along with that, there's also a little bit of on-center vagueness, probably because everything rubber on the car is still original. The rack bushings and steering coupler are known to cause issues on these Zs, so I have replacements. Over any bumps or construction, the suspension is super harsh. Over the set of train tracks, it just about rattled my teeth out. Again, low profile tires probably didn't help. On the rural back road and in the twisties, this is where the 280Z really belongs. This doesn't have power steering, so everything feels really analog and direct. The car feels really light going through corners and stays pretty flat. Suspension in the front is really firm, but not in a good way. And the rear is a little softer, but still doesn't feel like it's doing much damping, as I have a feeling that the shocks in all 4 corners are blown. Overall, it's awful on the highway, fun in the twisties, and if you ever find yourself on a gravel road like I once accidentally did, your teeth will fall out. So there's a ton of room for improvement. At the end of our test ride, we top off, wait, then top off again, and we get an average of 26.2 mpg, which is not bad considering its age. Alright, got the wheels off and we can see our first issue. Good thing I got new shocks because these are definitely leaking. I think we'll be good. We got new tie rods so we can destroy those, and we got new ball joints so we can also destroy those. Okay. Whew. Man, these brakes are heavy. Look, there's no preload on this spring. Man, yeah, now with everything out of the way, you can really see how beat up those joints were. Yeah, it's definitely worn out. Normally, I'll just destroy this since it's already destroyed, but I have the right tool for this. Easy. Oh man, those inner tie rods are wrecked. Maybe I'll need a new set of those. You know, even though I do have massive hammers to do this job, you know, having the right tools still makes it pretty easy and a lot less swearing. You know, you're not risking smashing your fingers if you miss with the hammer. Oh. God damn it. Maybe I should have gotten some poly bushings for this. Oh, we'll worry about that later. There's no preload on these springs, so it's okay to just blast these off. Oh. There we go. And this one has obviously been leaking. Doesn't move back. Oh, that felt bad. These are bad. Oh, easy. Oh, jeez. Oh my God. Oh, same thing. Covered in oil. These are the same KYBs, part numbers that I've got for replacements, so it looks good. Like, why would someone just dump so much oil in there? At least they were easy to remove. Here's the plan for the suspension. According to some nearly 2-decade-old forum posts, front springs from a 1980 Chevy Chevette will bolt right on. I'm doing this because it's impossible to find stock height replacement springs because Nissan obviously no longer sells them, and everyone's answer is only lowering springs or coilovers. But this is a budget build, and spending under $100 for all 4 springs versus thousands for coilovers is a wicked good deal if this works out. These are also a slightly stiffer spring rate than the original 280Z set, which I think may help the car with handling. Some said they needed to cut the coils, others claimed that they were fine, and those that did cut their coils said that their front ends were raised about 1 inch, which is exactly what I'm looking for with this Safari build. Now, there are a couple main concerns with the suspension setup and why it may not work and why it may be a risk. First is the suspension geometry may be out of whack. Specifically, camber is a concern because it may be positive, but in this case, a negative. For most performance applications, you want some negative camber because while turning, it will flatten the contact patch and increase traction while also preventing tire rollover, which is when the sidewall flexes and starts to contact the road as well. The positive camber does literally the exact opposite of this, which is not good, and no one has ever posted anything about their specific alignment after doing this, so we'll see the results for ourselves. Also a problem because there's no way to adjust camber from the factory. The next issue is that with the new ride height, we won't have enough droop. The stock replacement shocks have a limited stroke length, which becomes a problem if they are completely extended at the new ride height. The goal of the suspension is to move with the road's bumps and dips through both compression and rebound, and starting from a fully extended position is a problem if the road dips too deep too fast, and you risk losing contact completely with the road. This is suboptimal performance. Given the very cheap price point of this setup, these are risks I'm willing to take, and if they aren't an issue, there are some ways to mitigate them, but we're not going to worry about that yet. It's so f***ing heavy. Oh, God damn it. Okay, well, it's the next morning and the camera died with me struggling. So You didn't miss a whole lot besides me just trying to get this thing back together. It is now back together. We just have to torque everything down. Here are the little clicks. And then we'll work on the tie rods, steering rack, and then get this car on the ground and see how it looks with the new wheel tires, see if it's too tall. I have a feeling that I don't want to do this again, and I'll just leave it how it is. We'll see. That was loose. I could probably slide this thing out. Darn, thought I could just pull it out. You know, I have a feeling that these engine mounts are collapsed. Maybe I can just jack up the engine a little bit. We'll try that out. Ugh, the sway bar's in the way. This rack has definitely seen better days. Both boots have been torn for probably decades at this point, so we need to disassemble the rack completely, clean it, and lube it up to keep all the slidey bits inside sliding. These inner tie rods are on there pretty tight, so they take a little bit of effort and require a little bit of extra leverage. With it now mostly apart, we can see just how dirty and crusty everything is. This rack felt fine on the car, but on the bench this does not slide smoothly at all, probably because all the grease has washed out. I need to actually figure out how to get grease inside the rack and pinion, so next coming off is the preload adjustment nut and then the input shaft plate. The grease has completely dried out and is just a hard wax-like substance, honestly not doing its job anymore. If anyone is curious, this is a part number for the seal, which the service manual actually states every time this plate is removed, it should be replaced. So I went ahead and ignored it. Everything now gets slathered in grease. I accidentally used two different types of grease because what I had in the tub versus what was in the gun were different. I'm sure it matters a lot, and the rack will now fall apart from the inside out even faster than when it was filled with road grime and sand because of this. There's not really a good way to fill it up, but just butting the fitting up against a small hole there seemed to do the job. This preload adjustment screw should get adjusted, and the service manual again has a fancy procedure to this, but moving the rack back and forth it seemed fine without any obvious slack, so I thought it'd be okay. Future me found out that this was not in fact okay, so now adjusting the preload is a future me problem. Now we can thread on our inner tie rods and slip over our new boots. Notice that these actually don't fit, and we need to figure out a way to adapt these. This is where having a 3D printer is almost a must-have with a project car ownership, because I was able to measure up the surfaces, come up with an adapter using Fusion 360, and then print it out using TPU. Without this, I'd be stuck a week waiting for the right part to come in. Okay, cut a little split in it. I want to say that's close enough. Yes. Oh, greasy zip tie end and fingers. Oh my goodness. Perfect. I went ahead and printed another set for the other side, and I'm pleasantly surprised with how well these adapters worked, and only time will tell if TPU was the correct material choice for them. Now we can install the outer tie rods. Wait a week for new outer tie rods to come in because these were just total shit, brand new out of the box. Overbuilt for durability. Okay, new steering rack is prepped, all put together, ready to go in. New rack bushings. And once this goes in, then we can bolt everything up put the steering column back on, and then call steering done. Until parts come in tomorrow to do the outer tie rod ends, but we can throw this in all right now and be all set. All right, finally something that I'm really excited to put on is this Cusco strut bar. It actually came from Japan and all the instructions are actually in Japanese. But I think it's pretty straightforward. I already took the, god damn it, my glove already tore. I already took the nuts off, so you just slap this thing on and then, you know, tighten it back up. So I put fresh gloves on just to touch this. But yeah, this thing's gonna be sick. All right, new tie rods are in, so then we can just slap these on, call the steering done. And right behind the camera, right, you can't see it, but there's the wheel and tire combo that I went with. And so we'll get these slapped on so then I can show off what I got. Okay, let's talk wheel and tires. Now this is the most expensive part, so I want to do this right. Originally, this 280Z would have come with 195 70 14-inch tires. So with 14-inch rims, it would have been just stock Steelies, nothing special. When I got the car, this car had these Koenig rewinds on it. They're 15x7 and a pretty classic upgrade. You just can't go wrong with them. But there's a problem in that everyone and their mom does it, and I think they're kind of overplayed. So the other issue is these tires, this size that I have on here is a 195 50 15. This probably would have been better for like a Miata or if I was actually doing autocross or something. But this tire ended up being way too small of a profile for what the car is really meant for. And I think the ride was really suffered greatly from this. So I got a new wheel and this is what I got. I got this Yokohama Geolander AT. It's a 205 65 15 with a 280ZX turbo wheel. So staying with the black and chrome color scheme, I think this is going to look pretty good. Oh, let me get them right next to each other. That's a better idea of the height difference. Believe it or not, this is actually closer to the original height than this. So a couple issues that you run into dealing with the height things is you just can't go too tall because these 280Zs, you know, these straight sixes are old and they don't have the torque or the power to really just turn big meaty tires. So there's not really a whole lot of options in the 15-inch range. If you bumped up to 16-inch tires, then maybe you could find something. You'd have a ton of options from like Subarus, you know, people doing like these battle wagon builds. But you're kind of limited in the 15-inch range for tire options. I think these are going to be a great compromise between actually being able to drive the car on the road and get to trails and, you know, drive home afterward, hopefully not breaking the car on the trail. So I think these are going to perform well. We'll see how these work, and maybe on the test drive I'll give an honest review, a little bit better review, but so far I'm pretty excited. And let's see how they look on the car and what the stance is off the jack stance, because I got to see how much taller these springs are. So let's see this combo out. All right, I think this looks sick, and obviously it's a little tall right now. Hoping that maybe it'll settle a little bit, right? It usually does. The other thing I noticed is that because the car is sitting higher, there's like no negative camber at all. If anything, it might even be like a little bit of positive. We'll see how bad it is when we actually take this thing in for an alignment. So far, I'm pretty happy. Time to actually start working on the back. The rear suspension is actually pretty similar to the front. We're going to ignore what the service manual says on removal and instead just lower the control arm as much as possible to pivot the strut assembly out. This is a lot easier than a complete removal. To do this, we first undo the top strut nuts, disconnect the sway bar, separate the drive axle from the hub, disconnect the brake line and handbrake cable, as well as loosen the mounting bolt for the control arm bushings so you don't destroy them more than they already are. Now we can lower the control arm as much as possible and the assembly just pivots out. Doing it like this, we have really good access to work on it, plus it's held up nicely. After taking a closer look, the rear springs look to be original, which makes sense why the rear sagged, and it's also a strange choice to have lowering springs in the front but not in the rear. Assembly is just like the front. We're going to have the new shock, gland nut, bump stop, spring, while reusing the original strut mounts. Also, during this, I realized that I bent the lip of the fender trying to remove the strut, but a couple taps of the hammer set it back straight. Lifting the strut assembly back into place and lining it up yourself requires a little bit of creativity, but is doable. Now with this side done, we just have to repeat for the other side. Torque everything down, install the tires, and we're good to go. Okay, that was a lot of work. I'm dying. Lost like 10 pounds in water weight. But this is the last piece of the rear suspension, which is this Cusco rear strut bar. Goes right across the top. I had put the nuts in just loosely, so now they're off. So we'll just slap this bad boy on and call it done. Alright, we find ourselves back underneath here yet again, but this time to fabricate a skid plate. Now, there are some aftermarket skid plates that are modeled after the original one, but they don't actually protect enough of what I want, and they're kind of expensive for what you get. So we're stuck making our own. Now, I've got two pieces of material here that I think we can actually make something out of. Big piece is this. I've got a sign, and fire rescue, emergency access only. Guys, this is good stuff. It's pretty thick, and it's literally on the side of the road, free for your taking. You know, grab as many of these as you need. And for legal reasons, that's a joke. I did not do that. The other thing is this. This is actually a little arrow shield from a 86 300ZX. That one is no longer with us. Rest in peace. And it's not being used, so maybe we can do something with it. And I think I've already caught my eye on what I want it to do. Now, on the 300ZX, this is the original orientation. It would be somewhere like this, but I think perfect use case is this. Look at that. We even have these little ears that go on the side here. That's on both sides, covers perfectly. And then we have to figure out how we're gonna mount the back. But I think that's the least of our worries right now. This thing is, I think, gonna go this way. And of course, because this is plastic, this isn't metal, so we shouldn't really have any issues of this tearing a hole or wearing a hole into the aluminum. Okay, that's how it looks like now. A little bit better. Obviously, there is a lot of metal that is missing, and it has just turned into rust, and it is all down here. Yeah, that's a good amount of rust. And of course, you can see why I did that now. I'm holding it up. You can see that that ridge goes between the radiator support and the radiator to help stop anything coming in. With a loose plan together to protect the radiator, let's start thinking about the oil pan. I'm legally obligated to make the joke about this being cardboard aided design, So with that out of the way, we'll first cut down the cardboard to our starting shape. Luckily for us, the 280Z is really simple, so a flat rectangle is a good start. Except it's maybe too simple. We only have 2 threaded holes in the cross member to use to mount, so we'll have to get a little bit more creative to mount the rear, but we'll worry about that later. The only thing in the way right now is the exhaust pipe, which is simple enough to clearance. We'll paint mark some bolts and thread them into the holes to transfer their position on the cardboard. Now we can mock up how the skid plate will sit with the front splash shield as well. And enough overlap that should stay in place. With the mock-up success, we can go ahead and make our marks on the sign, cut out and clearance for the exhaust, and draw out the mounting holes. This looks really good. Now we just have to figure out how to mount the back, and this is going to be a little controversial, so be sure to leave a comment on why this is a bad idea. I'm going to use the hole here in the bottom of the transmission. No bolt goes through there, or at least not yet, and it's at the perfect spot to be used. I originally thought to use both on each side, but decided against it. The plan is to create an L-shaped bracket to drop down from that hole and onto the skid plate. I'm only going to use the one hole because using both I think wouldn't allow enough flex. The problem is the front is solidly mounted to the subframe, which hopefully shouldn't move. However, engine and transmission will move, given that these are the original mounts, probably a little too much. We need to make sure that there's enough flex in the mounting solution to A, not break the skid plate, and B, more importantly, not break the transmission. Luckily, I have perfectly engineered this aluminum bracket to be weaker than the transmission and to act as a sacrificial part. Also to help, I 3D printed some TPU bushings, so it'll have some flex when mounted. And here it is, all mounted up. And if anything, it offers more protection than nothing, which is what we're after.
Hey, don't lick that.
It may also have some aerodynamic benefits as well, but I don't have a wind tunnel to prove it, so it's a nice thought.
It's so bright. Okay, so lights came in, and I'm thinking I want to actually use this bumper. So many people get rid of these bumpers, but I'm telling you, it's actually a pretty good step stool. You can sit on it, and I think we can use it to mount the lights. So I think I want the lights around here, you know, on the inside of the turn signal, so you can, you know, see. I was just taking a peek, and actually right behind here is a perfectly placed, there's a bolt right here, a 12mm bolt, and I think we can make a bracket that gets this forward just a little bit to clear the bumper and to clear the hood. And I think here it's gonna look good. I don't want to fabricate nearly anything on this. I want this to be just, you know, bolt on, bolt off, easily reversible. And I have a perfect piece of scrap metal in mind to use. And it's right there behind the camera. Let's go check it out. Okay, as I was saying, this is the perfectly good piece of scrap metal just right here. Okay, safety squints engaged. Okay, the camera overheated at the same time I'm overheating, and I managed to strip the threads on the little mounting hole that I wanted to use. So I took the bumper off, got it mocked back up, and this is what I think it's going to look like. I think it's going to look pretty cool. Now we just got to test fit the hood because the hood hinges forward, so let's try that out. Yeah, it's not going to work. Okay, I managed to get the hole a little bit lower than I expected, but now let's make sure this thing clears before I celebrate. And there's one other issue that I can already see. Oh yeah, plenty of space. Okay, the next issue that some of you may have noticed is that this bumper is actually on a curve. The headlights point straight, but this light is pointing this way. So we need to get it to point that way. So I'm just thinking like that. Done. But now I'm just gonna go ahead, do the same thing on the other side and clean up these brackets, paint them, make them look a little bit nicer, and then we'll see finished product. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Woo! Sick. Normal lights, fogs. These lights have come together really, really well, and I'm really happy with how they've turned out. They look sick, and they look like they're gonna project a really good amount of light and really help out this front end with the lighting situation, because it wasn't too good before. So now we're gonna go ahead and focus on the next part to make this thing look good, because that's what it's all about, which is mud flaps. Obviously, every single rally safari car has a set of mud flaps. That means we can't go without them. I've got these off of a Datsun 620 or a 720 pickup from a junkyard like 10 years ago. I thought these just were cool because it said Datsun on them, and I had no plan to do anything with them. So, but now we're gonna do something. So we're gonna go ahead, slap these on. These are not gonna have anywhere just to mount originally. As far as I know, there's no original mounting locations for any sort of mud flaps for these. So we're gonna have to custom make some brackets, get a little creative, but I don't think it's gonna be too bad. You know, main issue is just gonna be trying to get them even and level. So make sure that they're at the proper height, and then, you know, proper level sticking out. So, but after that, we're gonna call it done, and then we can go take this thing on a test drive, which I'm really excited for.
Let's start with the passenger side, since that's the easiest. The panel here is actually removable, so I'm willing to drill some holes into it. After making some marks for where we want the flap to sit, we can then take the panel over to the bench and drill out our mounting locations. Now we can bolt up the flap directly to the panel, reinstall it, and check our fitment, which I think is pretty good. With the easy side done, it's also time to get a little bit more creative. Just like the skid plate, I'm going to be using some cardboard to create a template for a bracket spanning from the exhaust hanker stud to the outer lip of the fender. The muffler is kind of large, which fouls on the mud flap, causing it to not sit perfectly level, but I'm not buying a new exhaust, so we're going to just deal with it. I'm cutting out the bracket from a scrap piece of panel cut from the old body of that 300ZX, so it continues to live on. Bracket aligns up pretty well. However, this hole is really close to this edge, and I want to expand it out to use an M6 piece of hardware. I know I didn't want to put any holes in the body, but I don't want to put any more holes in the body. This one's already here. Damn, from here, it looks so good. Now that everything is done, we got lights done, mud flaps done, suspension done, wheels, tires done. What else did I do? Skid plates.
But this thing needs to get in alignment, and then we can take it on a real test drive and see if I made it worse or not. Let's take this car out of the garage and get a good look at it. Of course, I kind of trapped it in with trash, so we gotta clean that up first. This build is a total riot. 280Zs aren't supposed to look like this, but I'm really happy that it does. On the road, this drives way better than expected. The chunky sidewall and new suspension really soaks up any bumps you may encounter and rides really smoothly. Oh my god. I was concerned about having a 205 section with tire and no power steering, and in tight spaces you do notice it takes a little bit more effort, but on the road there's no issues. The gearing is also a lot better now that the tires are taller, and I notice that I'm not shifting as often and not revving it out nearly as much as I was before. Highway driving is comfortable besides the seats being worn out, and on the test drive on the same route as our baseline, I averaged 29 mpg, a 3 mpg increase from baseline, most likely due to the better highway gearing and maybe some aero benefits with the skid plates. Although now it sits at the perfect exhaust drone RPM at 75 miles an hour, which got annoying pretty fast. The tires are also surprisingly quiet for all terrains and don't transmit a ton of road noise. And of course, in the twisties, we still have a super fun car. The stiffer springs really help control the body, and everything feels like it's tightened up, and I like to think that the strut bars are helping out. You do, however, feel the extra weight in the wheels. With aggressive braking, it really feels like it has to work so much harder just because of the additional rotational mass. In part 1, I described one potential issue, which was increased positive camber because of the additional ride height. And it came true. After the alignment, we have about 1.5 degrees of positive camber in the front. Under aggressive turn-in, I do feel the front end grip starts to waver, most likely because of that positive camber. There is a way to fix that, and maybe I'll do it in a future episode. It also may be the tires. After all, these are 600 treadwear and all-terrains, obviously not made for performance driving, so maybe we're just finding the limit faster. Off-road and on a trail is actually really impressive. The 280Z is light and floats over most bumps, and with the tires aired down just a little bit, it really helps absorb and smooth out that roughness. The big question, how much taller is the ride height? Well, in the front we now have 11 inches of ground clearance between the radiator support and the ground, compared to our baseline of 6. And in the rear, the center of bumper to ground measurement went from 17 to 19.5 inches, and the same measurement is now 20 inches in the front. If we were to compare this to a stock vehicle, which would be 18 inches ride height, we gained 2 inches over stock in the front and 1.5 in the rear, which is more than I expected. Knowing this now really gives me the confidence I need to be quite ambitious off-road, along with the knowledge that I have some underbody protection. It has so far worked very well, and in the several hundred miles I've put on it, it's not broken or fallen off. Obviously, any car can go off-road if you're brave enough, but this 280Z just eats up fire roads like this and keeps asking for more. As for other cool factor modifications, the halo lights really do help light up the road and help with nighttime driving. It even came in handy, allowing me to spot a deer jumping in the road from the bushes after I was done filming this clip. The mud flaps are doing their job, helping protect the body from all the roosts we're throwing out, and of course, looking cool. Overall, I'm really surprised with how this turned out, and just proves it's possible to have fun on a budget, and that for me at least, there's no need to spend thousands of dollars on suspension setup and accessories. Am I actually going to run this car through the safari? No, I'm just running through these Appalachian hills, and I'm having a blast doing it. Whatever you do, make sure you're having fun as well.
Well, I'm really happy with how this 280Z has turned out. It's exceeded all my expectations. Now, if you have any comments, questions, concerns, make sure to drop a comment down below and subscribe in the future, because I think I'm going to take this on a rallycross. You know, David did it in his BMW, so we're going to see if this thing can survive as well. So besides that, let us know we're doing a good job by liking the video and subscribe, share with anyone else you think would enjoy it. And besides that, thanks for watching.